Kia ora and welcome to the Manawatu podcast, where we bring you the stories of people in technology who live in the Manawatu area. So I'm not going to waste too much time with this introduction. It's basically a podcast involving me talking in front of the camera, so I hope you enjoy it. Cool, Wicked. Welcome to this episode. Now, this episode is going to be an interesting one because generally I interview a guest. We have a guest on and they basically get interviewed by myself. They're generally in the technology realm in the Manawatu region. But this episode is a special one because obviously, as you can tell, there's no guest. It's just me in the microphone or me in front of the camera, depending if you're listening to this and viewing this. Now, the point of this episode is just to get listeners more aware of what the goals are for this podcast, the Manawa Tech podcast, like what the kind of goals are and what the thing is, what the site is for the future at this present moment, what the future is. And as well as the listeners to get to kind of know me better, know me as the host. Now, I understand it's quite difficult to be a guest on podcast shows. So I'm sort of giving myself my own medicine to see what it actually feels like. So today I've got some questions for me to kind of go through. And from there, I'll sort of branch out, keeping in mind that we want to know what this podcast is about, as well as me as a host. So now, before I kind of dive into the questions, you're probably wondering who I am. So my name is Siobhan, and I am a web developer. I work as a web developer for a company known as iSpace over on Australia in Adelaide, based in Adelaide. So I work as a remote worker. And I got into the technology realm, this is the first question. How did you get into technology? I've been working as a web developer for just over 6 months, and I'm loving it so far. But how did I get into the technology realm? So if you're wondering, I'm 30 years old. So, and I've only been working in this role for 6 months. My first ever job as in the technology realm in 6 months. So you're probably wondering what I did before that. So my start in the working world had nothing to do with technology. So I started working as an optometrist. So you're going to be wondering how I got from optometrist to web developer. It's an interesting story. So when I started working as an optometrist, I did my degree up in Auckland, Bachelor of Optometry, and I started that degree when I was 19, and I started working when I was 23. So really young, too young to make a decision that would affect your entire life, in my opinion anyway. So I'd been working for an optometrist, so went to university, graduated, and then I started working, and it came to about, I'd say, the 3-4 year mark where I kind of discovered that optometry really isn't for me. Now, don't get me wrong. I think optometry is a great career. You are helping people and you're dealing with eyesight. And I guess anyone listening to this podcast or watching this podcast knows how important vision is. Vision is really important. So it's kind of really, really a privilege to be working in that kind of area. And for me, what didn't stick with optometry was the fact that I think the one thing was it just was kind of a monotonous and repetitive job. So even though you're seeing people every day, you're kind of saying the same things, having the same sort of conversations. And I think after 3-4 years, you kind of get a bit over that. And the avenues outside of that wasn't something that resonated with me. So the next kind of step would be you could challenge yourself by owning a practice, or you could challenge yourself by I don't know, like doing locoming or working for a rep company, but those things weren't really kind of resonating with me at that time. So thinking about what I wanted to do is I kind of thought, hey, I'll do some programming or learn programming because that was sort of the thing at the time. This is when I started learning programming was about 3 years ago. Now, before that, I actually had a bit of foray into programming when I was in high school. So I don't know if you know much about the Casio graphics calculators. But I actually made little programs on those Casio programming calculators. And there was this one game I made which involved having a ship. You fly the ship through, and then you'd shoot asteroids coming onto the screen. It sounds really complicated, but it was very simple to make. It was basically just you had a ship in the middle, and then you had random asterisks come across the screen, and then you can move the ship up and down and fire them off. So that's kind of my first foray into programming something. And I sort of did that in high school and sort of forgot about that until 5 years into my career. So I would have been about 27. So imagine 16, 17, playing around with graphics calculators programming, and then 10 years later, getting back into it. And I sort of had many false starts in programming. I tried learning Python. I learned it in a month via a video course and then forgot about it. Then a year later, I sort of sat down at 27 years of age and had a serious chat to myself. I'm going to really commit to programming and really learn it, because I know I wasn't going to be an optometrist. Well, I didn't see myself being an optometrist further down the line. So I thought, hey, I'm going to really commit to programming. And I enjoyed it. The main thing that I really enjoyed about programming was it felt like I was really challenging myself, and I was putting myself into that kind of state of flow. You know, when you're working on something, you just time just seems to disappear. That's something I really craved, as well as that challenge and being able to use my brain. And I really wasn't getting that in my previous career as an optometrist. You know, I was just kind of going through the motions. Even though I've talked about optometry enough, is that it's a well-paying job. It's relatively stress-free. You get normal work hours, and it was always in demand career. So I was lucky in that regard, but it wasn't something that resonated with me like I would think programming would. So coming back to the story of learning programming, so I was learning with this book called Automate the Boring Stuff after having many kind of false starts. And sorry, the book was called Automate the Boring Stuff by Al Sweigart, by the way. It's a great book. The book basically teaches you how to learn, teaches you Python programming, but in the context of office work. So being able to do repetitive tasks again and again, being able to open files, which I think was really great to provide that excellent context. And what I really, really committed to was two things. Excuse me, doing an hour of programming a day, so the consistency, as well as doing the exercises. So the mistakes I was making before was I was just basically, typing on my keyboard, following instructions of someone else or copying someone else's code. The real key to programming is those two things. You're being consistent, but also you have to do the work. You've got to form those connections. You've got to go through the problems, and it has to be difficult. You have to challenge yourself. And I think as a tip to anyone who wants to get into programming or is learning programming, the tips I'd recommend is you actually have to do the work. And I'll go a step further to say you've got to make your own projects, because that's where you kind of learn. The learning isn't passive. You're actively learning, you're searching for things, and then that's really necessary. Like learning based on dependency or necessariness is kind of the best way to learn. Like if you have to know something, it'll stick in your brain rather than sitting down and passively taking it in. That was really a switch for me, I think. Because in university and high school, we kind of get taught what to learn, versus when you're self-teaching, you kind of have to seek out what you need to know. And I think that's really key to learning programming. But anyway, came back to the story. I was learning programming and I was hooked. I really liked that process of, there's this bug, how do I fix it? Or there's this particular problem, I want to be able to solve it, or I want to be able to, do this sort of thing and be able to share it with the world. And that's another thing too. I really got into making websites. And that was just with WordPress, but I was fascinated by the fact that you could create something on the internet and share it with people that wasn't just on, on social media websites, just making a post on social media or uploading an image to Instagram. You could make something with your own domain and share it with other people. And that's what kind of got me excited about programming and web development. So fast forward a few kind of months to a year, I was learning a bit of Python. I learned a framework called Django. So Django is a web framework in Python. Batteries included, so it includes a database and things like that. And I worked on this project where it involved making or turning data from weightlifting results. So weightlifting involves snatch and clean and jerk, putting it into a database and being able to demonstrate that or show that to users. That was kind of a project I worked on, a really, really big project. I had many other little projects before that, but that's where I kind of really got the ball rolling in terms of developing my skills and being able to show things to people, actually make something, like sort of an end-to-end project. Now, going back just a little bit, when I was doing that book, Automate the Boring Stuff, I didn't finish it to the very end. I kind of got to the level where I was able to think of an idea or think about what I wanted to do and then be able to execute on it. Now, when I talked about doing projects and making your own projects, the hardest part is you don't know what to build. Like you don't have the skills to build what you know you can build. So for example, if you're very naive, you think you can build the next Facebook. That's very hard to do, versus you get to a point where it's really hard and you think you can't make anything of value. So it's that sweet spot where you got to build the skills slowly to a point you can figure out what you want to make. So I hope that kind of makes sense. But anyway, I started learning web development through learning Django, and I made this application. It was a Django REST framework backend, so REST API, talking to a database, and essentially a React front end to display results on these weightlifting results, because we didn't have any way of displaying weightlifting results. A lot of it was just in Excel files. So you can imagine this is kind of cool to make. I do weightlifting as a hobby. That's one of the questions, by the way. One of the questions is, what do I do outside technology? But that's something I wanted to make, and that was a lot of fun. I was combining hobbies that I knew, the potential to be able to show people this, as well as learning, Python, Django, and a bit of JavaScript, React. Then I was doing that for a while, and I was posting on LinkedIn constantly. That's another kind of tip as well, posting on LinkedIn, because I want to sort of get into how I got this kind of my first job at iSpace. So I was posting a lot on LinkedIn, posting about my true, authentic feelings about optometry, how I felt like this career wasn't really for me. I'm learning programming, and thankfully, the algorithm of LinkedIn, one person, a really, really important individual in my life, saw this post, and they work for the company iSpace, and they basically messaged me saying, "Hey, I see you're an optometrist. You're learning programming. We're looking for developers. You should talk to the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer of our company." And this is about, I think, December of last year, 2022, and I basically had an interview with the CTO, and we went through that project I was talking about before, that weightlifting project. We talked about that project, and we went through the project together. I sort of explained what sort of packages I used, and why I use those packages, and how the application sort of works. So that kind of gives you a really good idea. I think it's a tip for anyone. If you have a project, you're one, A, passionate about it, and B, because you built it from the ground up, you know what's going on, all the moving parts. And then when you're building a kind of an end-to-end project like this, you see the pitfalls and issues. But anyway, I had this interview, I had a series of follow-up interviews. Initially, what the company wanted me to do was do a take-home project, but unfortunately, we just couldn't figure out how to do that. So instead, I kind of had an interview and then basically given a task to do in front of the person interviewing me, and I was able to do that fine. I'd learnt, learning from automate the boarding stuff, all that I needed to do. I was able to do that, and they eventually led to my first job in web development. So it is a bit of luck, but I do believe you make your own luck, and that's where, coming back to that, a personal project, being something you're passionate about, and just putting yourself out there on LinkedIn. So being open and authentic. So I understand that may not work for some people, but that's kind of how I got my start into being a web developer. And it's been 6 months and I'm enjoying it. I've been really happy with the career change. So I kind of really hope that for most people. And I'm starting to think that's starting to become more of the case these days. And we'll hopefully find out people as this podcast matures. I'll be able to get guests on who would be in a similar situation or be able to give tips. So I kind of hope that this podcast does, or what I've just said today, helps some people out there. Now, the next question, we kind of know how I got into technology. So the next question, and sorry, the company I work for, they basically, we have a sort of a division where we do technology. We build a web application, or we have software, and we also have a clinical team, because we basically build contact lenses for optometrists. So you can see the kind of the link there, but I'm on the development side. So we still work with optometrists, and I've actually used iSpace as a tool as an optometrist, and I think it's an amazing tool. So I've worked on both ends of the scale, so I'm kind of lucky where I am. But I guess it kind of answers the question how I got into technology in a very roundabout way, or a long way. The next question I had was starting this podcast. So how did we start this podcast? Or how did I start this podcast? So I've been going to the technology meetups in Palmerston North for almost a year. So I go to the monthly meetups, and I met Steve. So Steve is basically the person who is a board member of Manawa Tech, and he basically started the whole show, from my understanding. And Steve essentially said to me, a few months down the track, "Siobhan, do you want to start a podcast?" Because he saw what I was posting on LinkedIn. I like creating content, and I like hearing about other people's stories, and I was a bit tentative at first, because yes, I like to make content, but usually it's just me talking in front of the camera, or me writing some stuff down, or me doing YouTube video. Interviewing guests is something that I'm scared about. I'm not something that puts me outside my comfort zone. But I do think that life is about, if you're comfortable all your life is boring. So you got to make things fun by putting yourself outside the comfort zone. And I think that's what this podcast is. It's me putting myself outside my comfort zone, plus getting to meet really cool people in the technology realm and to meet individuals. Now, I don't want to make this all about me. That's kind of the selfish reason, is to for me to put myself outside my comfort zone. Plus, I like to create connections. So it gives build security, but to create connections. And another reason I want to start this podcast too is I want to give technology, or the individuals in technology, visibility, and especially in the Manawatu region, visibility, and to get the stories out there, because I feel I didn't even know about when I first moved down to Palmerston North. Well, I live with my parents here. But when I moved back to Palmerston North from where I was originally, I didn't think there was a big technology realm in Palmerston North. But it's quite surprising how many people, how big our tech community is. And wouldn't it be even better if we could give our tech community a voice, or to be able to share the story through this podcast? And that's kind of what this podcast really is. The goal of the podcast is to get people's stories out there in the Manawatu technology realm, to build that community. Obviously, we have people listening, and if someone's story resonates with someone else, they can help someone else. It can help build connections, because, hey, a person could be listening to your story if you're the guest, and that could lead to a connection down the route. And people get to know who you are. And I honestly think that with technology these days, it's not about becoming famous. It's more about becoming well known. And I think that's how I got my job. Even it was not through applying through the traditional route. It was building connection, an authentic personal brand, getting a story out there, and then happen to reach someone, and then it led to really good things. So I do think that this podcast can help inspire people, it can help build connections, and helps build that community. And that's kind of the goal of the podcast, is I want to be able to do that, as well as to build that curiosity around people's stories and lives, and to make Manawatu, the Manawatu region, to make technology a more humanistic kind of thing. And I think technology can, we always think technology is ones and zeros, but this kind of blends that human element into technology. And that's kind of the goal. So the next question I've sort of asked myself is, where do you see yourself in technology? And do you have any big goals in the future? So at the moment, I'm very happy where I am at the moment, working in technology. I definitely do want to create more content and help more people around technology. I kind of want to, because I think I'm very fortunate in the position that I am, coming from where I was before, like non-technology, to someone in this tech job. And I do think programming is a beautiful thing. It's very fun to do. It's a very stable job, great career, good flexibility. But I want others to have that success as well. Others to have that same, what I have right now. I want that to be available to everyone. I do think technology is a very open career. Because a lot of jobs involve a lot of red tape. I feel like a lot of jobs have a lot of red tape around it. Getting in is very difficult. And in fact, technology is not like that. It's very open. There's different ways of getting into programming. You can self-study. You can go through degree, traditional route. You can do a boot camp. There's so many ways you can get into it. And I'd be very fortunate in how I got my job. And I kind of want that for other people who potentially want the same, or who want the same. That's kind of my goal in life. What I want to do is help people get on that route, and mentor people along that route. I do have very, 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 very big goals in a long time future, is to lead a team one day. So at the moment, I'm junior in my career, very fresh in my career, but I kind of want to be at a stage where I can help other people, or be able to build a team. And through being that team leader, is to make programming fun for others, or make it a fun culture where we're constantly learning. And that's where I'm working at the moment. My boss is a fantastic boss. My immediate manager is fantastic, and that he's able to spark curiosity within us. And he always tells us to just try something new, or learn something, deep dive. Don't be afraid to just dive into it. Don't think about the business metrics too much, although business is very important. Just try and learn and have that curiosity. And I kind of want to be able to pass that torch on to other people to have that curiosity. So that's kind of my goals in technology, is one, to be someone who inspires others to get onto this kind of pathway of technology, no matter where you're from. I call it the career switching. And two is to be able to lead a team one day, make other people better as well. I think that's a very rewarding thing. That's something I want to focus on in the future. So the next question I've written to myself is, what are the biggest areas you struggle with in technology? So there are kind of a few things I struggle with technology. So the first is people interaction. So I'm working remotely right now, and I struggle with the personal connection. So working as an optometrist, you see people all the time, but here it's kind of it's just me. Like, I'm just working in front of the computer, and I get really excited for stand-ups and meetings because that's when I get to see people, but not in the flesh. I do love the flexibility this job comes with, but it's hard sometimes that you don't have colleagues to work with. So kind of experimenting with things like going to a cafe, or what I try and do is after I try to have a routine in the morning, so get ready like I normally would in the morning, and then in the evenings I try and do something social, like that could be this will be in the following question: what I do outside of work. But I've got multiple hobbies that involve seeing people and meeting people. And that's kind of where I get my kind of fill my jug up with meeting people. Some of the things I struggle with technology is focus. Now that I don't have any colleagues, or there's no like appointment schedule to keep up, like with my previous career, I feel like the day can you can lose your time in the day, or you could just do something that's not productive. And I think a remedy for that is just maintaining your kind of daily routine, waking up at the same time, going through the motions. Like, what I usually do is I wake up, walk the dog, have a shower, meditate, make a coffee, then work, lunch, work in the afternoon, then do the outside activities after work. I think that's really great. So it stops the day sort of blending into one. Those routines kind of give you the illusion, not the illusion, but like it sort of simulates that commute to work or going away from work. And I think having something planned at the end of the day means that you won't just say to yourself, "Oh, I'm going to just just waste the afternoon, and then eventually I'll catch up later on." So I think those are kind of the strategies that I'm implementing, and I do think it's a struggle. Now, another struggle I find is technology is very, very overwhelming, and it's hard to keep up. And I feel like, because this is a career I want to be in, I want to be the best at my career. And there's two issues with that. And I think the first issue is that technology is always going to change, but there's going to be underlying principles that pretty much stay the same. So there could be always the new new JavaScript framework coming out. There's always a new technology to learn. And though it's fun being able to learn these things, it's great that things are fresh. It can be quite overwhelming. You can't know everything. But also, too, the underlying principles stay the same. So at work, I usually have a day a week where we can learn things like you can learn whatever you want to learn on a day a week. And that could be a small little project, like, for example, I was learning Tauri, which is basically a Rust project that can make a sort of web application, a desktop application. So that could be something I learn a day, or I could spend 6 months going through a course by MIT called remember the name, Structure and Interpretation of Computer Programs. So that could be a course I could do. And within that course, they talk about what computer science is, and computer science is more about how you think rather than this new technology. So it's about learning that. What I'm trying to say is it's about learning those underlying principles, which really haven't changed. I do find that history does repeat itself. So with frameworks, we know that we went from multi-page applications to single-page applications, going off-platform, for example, using APIs for forms, etc. Now we're coming back to using the kind of the browser features, more back to combining both single page and multi-page applications. You kind of see we've kind of sort of made that circle. So just remember that history does repeat itself, and some of the things in history come back. So yeah, that's kind of like my explanation of the struggles I have with technology, just the overwhelm. So kind of summarizing: overwhelm and being able to not be overwhelmed with too much, and just make sure you have those routines as well. Now, what do I do outside technology? So this is something I really want to kind of get into, because prior to getting into having this job as a web developer, before that, I was working as an optometrist, and I used to do weightlifting. I started weightlifting back when I was 22, 21. I sort of kept that through university, pretty much through optometry. It was just a hobbyist weightlifter as well. I was not good. But I sort of stopped that to really focus on programming. So basically my life was go to work, then do programming on the evenings, even during lunch breaks, even between patients, learn how to program. And I have these ideas on my head about learning how to program. Then when I got the tech job, I can kind of relax, and then I don't want to be programming my entire time. It's all right to be programming for work, and then doing a bit of like your side projects outside of work. But I think it's really important to have the mix and blend of things to be healthy and have that overall well-being. So that's where I kind of focus on more hobbies. So some things I've decided to pick up is I still do weightlifting. I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's something I picked up at the start of this year of 2023, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I also do Latin dancing. And one of the interesting kind of hobby I've just started dabbling in with is pole fitness or pole dancing. So those are kind of the things I do outside of tech. And that's in the aim of not only having good physical kind of, maintaining good physical shape performance, because we're at our desk, tech is a very sedentary job, but kind of the aim is to, maintain a good physical body, and also good fitness, and also for mental well-being and social well-being, because I believe if you do things physical, it's good for your mental state. Getting away from the computer outside is really good, generally a good idea, because you're seeing people. And also, obviously, when you see people, you're building the social connections. So when you go to a place like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you see other people. If you go to the gym, you kind of see other people. And if you do Latin dancing, you also see people as well. And these are things I kind of want to do for the rest of my life. And I'm also learning how to fly as well. So I'm getting one more thing. And I'm learning how to fly as well. So I'm getting my private pilot's license. So these are the kind of things I'm doing outside tech. You don't need to do as much as I do. I'm kind of I think I would say I'm an overachiever. But just pick one thing, and doing outside of work, I think is a really good idea. Something that's not tech related, something with your hands, something practical, where you're going to see people as well. I think that's really, really important to maintain that kind of healthy balance. So yeah, we're kind of coming to the end of this episode. I'd like to finish off with what the guests, what their favorite thing on their desk is. I might change this in the future, but my favorite thing on my desk is at the moment is this little clock here. So you probably can't see it if you're not a viewer, but it's called a timer clock, and essentially the timer clock, you can sort of turn this little dial here, and this is sort of an incentive for people to watch the videos, I guess. But when I turn the dial, it kind of comes up with the red disc, and you can do it for up to an hour or less than that, and it sort of gives you a visual representation of how much time you have left. So it's kind of coming back to focus. If you want to be able to focus, if I have this here, put it on my desk, I can see the time sort of ticking away. And if I have, for example, a meeting or a block of work I can do for an hour, I'll just set that timer up. And when that timer kind of stops, I can, have a break or come back to, do a different task. So that's kind of my favorite item on my desk. I might do like a favorite desktop application as well. And one of my favorite desktop applications to use is Raycast. This is not sponsored in any way, but Raycast, I've got a Mac OS. And Raycast allows me to navigate my file system desktop applications quite easily. So I can just double tap and type in anything like Firefox or whatever application like iTerm that I want to open up, without having to go to the Start or the Finder or I think it's what's it on Mac? It's like the Finder or whatever tool to search things up or open up the applications. That's something I really enjoy as well. So thank you for listening to this episode. If you have any feedback, if you would like to be a guest on the show, please get in touch with me. I'll leave the descriptions and how to get in touch with me down below. And like I said, I hope this has been an interesting episode. And I'm looking forward to a bright future with this podcast. And I'm really, really excited. So I hope you guys are really excited too. In terms of posting frequency, we're looking at, I think once a fortnight will be really good. Could be more, could be less, but we're really early days. And I'm really excited to kind of get this on the go. So yeah. I hope to see you again in the next episode, and you have a great day. Thank you.